They said they couldn't afford Dad's therapy, then posted from a luxury cruise I accidentally paid for, so I cut off every dollar forever. You ever have one of those moments where your entire life suddenly makes sense? Every red flag, every gut feeling you ignored, every time someone told you family comes first. Yeah. Mine came the day I found out my parents were cruising through the Greek Isles on my dime, after crying to me 2 days earlier about not being able to afford my dad's physical therapy. But let me back up. My name's Jake Miller. I'm 32, from Columbus, Ohio. Grew up in a tight middle-class neighborhood. Mom was a teacher, Dad worked logistics. We had a modest house, a backyard with one tree, and a driveway just big enough for one car if you parked with care. And in that house there were 2 kids, me and my younger sister, Madison. She's 28 now, but she's been the golden child since birth. Straight-A student, homecoming queen, piano prodigy, the whole package. Our walls were covered in framed certificates with her name on them. My stuff? Shoved in drawers if kept at all. I wasn't a bad kid, just different. While Madison was winning spelling bees and blowing kisses from theater stages, I was in the garage taking apart lawn mowers and fixing busted fans for the neighbors. I loved working with my hands, figuring stuff out, but to my parents that wasn't ambition. It was a waste of potential. Mom once told her friend at a barbecue within earshot, Jake's more of a tinkerer than a scholar. Tinkerer. Like I was some 1800s village repairman. Meanwhile, Madison got praised for baking cookies once with a Pinterest recipe. When I was 15, I rebuilt a broken bookshelf from scrap and entered it into the county fair's woodworking contest. Took first place. Came home bursting with pride. My parents? Didn't even look up. "That's nice, hon," Mom said while helping Madison rehearse her speech for a debate tournament 3 weeks away. Dad knocked it over later that week while moving Madison's keyboard stand. Didn't apologize, just said I should have left it somewhere safer. High school didn't change much. Madison was valedictorian. I was solid. Passed my classes, played some baseball, fixed up cars with my friend Tyler after school. Got a part-time job at a local carpentry shop when I was 17. I thought Dad would be proud. Instead, he scoffed. "So you're choosing splinters over a diploma?" Madison was working at some test prep center. Volunteering, of course, and Mom said it would look great on her resume. My job. Apparently proof I didn't care about my future. But you know what? I stuck with it. While Madison jetted off to Stanford on a full scholarship, yes, they threw her a huge send-off party with matching cupcakes and a custom banner, I enrolled in a local trade school. I didn't need the debt, and I didn't want to spend 4 years chasing a degree I didn't believe in. I wanted to build things, real things. Graduated at the top of my class, specialized in fine furniture. Got hired by one of the most respected studios in the region, but when I told my parents, all they said was, "That's great, Madison just got invited to a think tank program in D.C. No matter what I did, it didn't matter. I once got featured in a local design magazine for a custom reclaimed wood dining table I made. Mom asked if I could send a few copies. I thought she was proud. Later saw them stacked near the recycling bin, untouched, but a random holiday card from Madison's boss, framed in the hallway. Eventually, I stopped trying to compete. By 27, I'd saved enough to buy the shop I worked in after my mentor, Tom, retired. Renamed it Miller Woodworks. Not exactly a branding masterpiece, but it was mine. First year was hell. I was sleeping on a pull-out cot in the office half the week, living off cheap coffee and cheaper takeout. But I was building something real, something I owned. I made one mistake during that first year, asking my parents for a small loan to buy a new bandsaw after the old one cracked during a job. Just $2,000, 0 cents to hold me over while I waited on a big hotel project payment to come through. Dad actually laughed. "You want us to invest in your little hobby shop, Jake? We're not made of money." 2 weeks later, I found out they'd wired Madison $5,000, 0 cents for a weekend leadership retreat in Napa Valley. When I brought it up, Mom said, "That's different. It's an opportunity she can't pass up." Right. Because wine tasting with corporate interns is clearly more urgent than replacing broken tools that I use to pay my rent. Still, I kept going. Landed that hotel gig. Then another, with a local church looking to restore its pews. Word got around. Jake Miller doesn't cut corners, literally or figuratively. Clients started calling me directly. I expanded the shop, hired 2 part-timers, built a name for myself. Nothing flashy, just honest, handcrafted work that people appreciated. Meanwhile, Madison got engaged to Derek, one of those finance bros who wears loafers without socks. They announced it at Thanksgiving. My mom cried. My dad hugged Derek like he'd just won the Heisman. When I told them I was planning to propose to my girlfriend Emily, Mom barely blinked. "Oh, that's nice. Let us know the date." When Emily and I got married at a small garden near the lake, they showed up an hour late. Said Madison had a hair emergency. We had 40 guests, folding chairs, and sandwiches made by Emily's aunt. Madison's wedding a year later? Ballroom in Chicago, 5-figure floral budget. My parents actually took out a loan to help pay for it. Meanwhile, they asked me to cover the electric bill the same month. I did, like an idiot. Because no matter how many times they chose her over me, I still believed maybe, just maybe, one day, they'd see me. That hope, that need to belong, it's what kept me sending those weekly checks, $600, 0 cents every Friday like clockwork, for emergencies, for repairs, for just a little short this month, son. I never questioned it, just assumed things were tough on them financially. Emily warned me. "Jake, this isn't charity. This is codependence." But the truth? I wasn't ready to let go of the dream that maybe someday I'd get a "we're proud of you" without a disclaimer. And then came that June afternoon. I'd just gotten home from a brutal 14-hour day, knees aching, back tight, sawdust still stuck to the back of my neck, when our neighbor Mr. Jenkins called out over the fence, "Hey, Jake, your folks enjoying that Mediterranean cruise?" I froze mid-step. "What cruise?" He looked confused. "You didn't know? Your sister's been posting all about it. Looks like quite the trip. Santorini, Mykonos, some luxury boat with a pool." And that's when everything broke wide open. I barely managed to nod at Mr. Jenkins before rushing inside. My heart was racing, not from exhaustion anymore, but from something sharper. Betrayal. I pulled out my phone, opened Instagram, and searched for Madison's profile. I almost never checked social media. Running a business left me little time for scrolling. But what I saw made my stomach churn. Photos from Greece, Santorini sunsets, grateful for this family getaway, and Preston treating us like royalty. My parents were tagged in nearly every post. Mom in a wide-brimmed sun hat holding a fruity drink. Dad grinning next to a plate of oysters. Madison flashing her signature smug smile in front of ancient ruins. They all looked perfectly happy, completely unbothered, and just 2 days earlier, Mom had called crying, telling me Dad's knee was acting up again, that the copay for physical therapy was more than they could afford that month. I remember sitting in my truck that morning, transferring $900, 0 cents instead of the usual $600, 0 cents, telling Emily we'd have to push back buying those new tires for another few weeks. Now I was staring at evidence that they used that money to sip cocktails in Athens. I didn't say anything that night. Emily found me sitting in the dark at the kitchen table, scrolling through receipts and texts. I showed her the pictures, the transfer history, my spreadsheet where I kept track of every payment I'd made to my parents over the past few years. She didn't gloat or say, "I told you so," even though she'd warned me countless times. She just reached across the table, took my hand, and said gently, "So, what now?" That question echoed in my head all night. What now? Keep sending money to people who clearly didn't need it? Keep sacrificing for a family that never sacrificed for me? I realized in that moment that I'd been waiting my entire life for people to change, to see me differently, to care in a way they never would, and the only person I was hurting was myself. The next morning I called my workshop manager, told him I'd be in late, drove straight to my parents' house. Their car and Madison's were both in the driveway. They were home. I parked directly behind them, boxing them in. I wasn't going to give them the chance to dodge me this time. Dad answered the door in pajama pants and a t-shirt that said, "World's Best Grandpa A." A shirt, by the way, that I gave him 3 Christmases ago that he'd claimed was a little cheesy. His face drained of color when he saw me. Mom appeared behind him, wrapped in a silk robe, mascara smudged under her eyes. "Jake, what a surprise," she said, her voice flat. "So how was Greece?" I asked, stepping inside before they could object. Dad cleared his throat. "Now, Jake, I think—" "You're jumping to—" "Cut the crap," I snapped. "You called me crying for therapy money 2 days before boarding a luxury cruise ship. You didn't think I'd find out?" Madison appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a hoodie that probably cost more than my entire week's work wardrobe. She leaned over the railing and smirked. "Oh, come on, Jake. You wouldn't have liked it anyway. No wood shops or hardware stores in Santorini." I ignored her and turned back to my parents. "How long," I asked, "how long have you been using my money for stuff like this?" Mom tried the waterworks. "Jake, we never meant to hurt you. We just needed a break. Life has been so hard lately." "Hard," I repeated, my voice rising. "Hard is working 60-hour weeks while sending you money I couldn't afford to give. Hard is skipping meals to pay for your so-called emergencies while you're sipping wine on a yacht. You used me over and over." Dad stepped forward. "We're family, son. We thought you understood that we all support each other." "Funny," I said coldly, "because I don't remember any of you supporting me when I bought my first table saw, or when I opened the shop, or when I got married. No calls, no checks, no help, just demands." Madison rolled her eyes. "Jake, don't be so dramatic. Preston covered the big stuff. Mom and Dad just needed some extra pocket money. You act like you were their only option." "Was I?" I asked. "'Cause last I checked, Preston didn't pay their gas bill last winter, or their HOA fees, or send money marked therapy that turned into shopping sprees in Athens. That was me, and now it's done." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and right in front of them canceled every recurring transfer I had set up. Then I blocked their accounts from receiving anything further. The panic in their eyes was instant. Real. Far more real than any affection they'd ever shown me. "Jake, wait." Mom reached for my arm. "You don't understand. We were under pressure." "No," I said firmly. "You were selfish. You lied. You took, and when I finally found something I was good at, something I loved, you laughed at it. Madison mocked it, and still I helped you." "Not anymore." Madison descended the stairs and folded her arms. "Wow. So this is how you treat family now? Real mature." I turned to her slowly. "No, Madison. This is how I treat parasites." With that, I walked out, slammed the door behind me, and drove away. I didn't even look in the rearview mirror. That evening, I sat down with Emily and told her everything. Every lie, every guilt trip, every dollar. She didn't say much, just nodded and asked one thing. "So, are we free now?" I nodded. "Yeah, we are." From that day on, I stopped sending money, blocked their numbers, changed my phone settings so unknown calls went straight to voicemail. I warned my staff that if anyone from my family showed up at the shop, they were not to be let in under any circumstances. For the first time in my adult life, I set a boundary, and I held it. The first few weeks were strange. My phone stayed quiet. No texts asking for help, no sudden crises requiring my urgent funds. It was like the silence after a storm. A peace I wasn't sure I trusted yet, but it was peace nonetheless. Or taking that $600, 0 cents a week, and putting it into a separate savings account. Emily labeled it Freedom Fund. After 3 months, there was nearly $8,000, 0 cents in that account. Money that would have disappeared without a second thought if I hadn't finally said no. We used a portion of it to replace our old car's tires. Took a weekend trip to Asheville, bought ourselves a decent espresso machine because why not? It felt surreal, choosing what to spend our money on instead of letting someone else dictate our priorities through guilt. And for the first time, I saw what life could look like when I wasn't tethered to a bottomless pit of obligation. I threw myself into work, but not in the exhausting way I used to. I had more clarity, more energy. We even started talking about finally trying for a kid, something we'd been putting off for years because we couldn't afford the time, or the money, or the mental space. Suddenly, everything felt possible. That's when I realized my family had never really supported me. They tolerated me when I was useful, and discarded me the moment I set a boundary. And now that I was done being used, they were silent. Which was fine by me, because silence, I found, was a hell of a lot better than lies. 4 months passed. 4 months of quiet mornings and peaceful weekends. I didn't realize how much weight I'd been carrying until I put it down. My business, Miller Woodworks, started thriving like never before. Without my attention constantly being pulled toward one family emergency or another, I could finally focus. I took over the vacant space next door and expanded the workshop from 4 bays to 8, hired 3 more carpenters, and brought in a part-time bookkeeper. We started offering high-end restoration services, and the word spread fast. One client, a collector of 18th-century desks, became a regular and started sending his rich friends my way. Within 6 months, revenue was up 25%. Every Friday, when that Freedom Fund account received its weekly deposit, I'd check the balance and feel this quiet rush of satisfaction. That number growing wasn't just money, it was proof I'd reclaimed my life. It was healing, brick by brick. At the end of the 6th month, we had over $14,000, 0 cents in that account. Emily started calling it our reset button. We were using it for us, things we'd never allowed ourselves to think about before. We bought a new sofa that didn't sag in the middle. We went out for sushi without checking the price first. I even started fixing up our backyard shed into a side project space where I could restore vintage cabinets on weekends, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the bandwidth for. I sold my first restored cabinet for $4,200, 0 cents. An antique walnut piece from the 1880s that I brought back to life over 2 weekends. The guy who bought it was nearly speechless when he saw the finished product. That moment, handing over something I'd poured my soul into and getting real value for it, meant more to me than any hollow praise my family had ever given Madison. It was respect, earned, honest. By the 8th month, Emily and I booked our first real vacation together. Nothing fancy, just a quiet cabin along the Tennessee River, surrounded by trees, no cell service, no responsibilities. We hiked, we fished, we played cards by the fire. I slept better than I had in years. On the last night, sitting by the river with a glass of wine, Emily leaned against my shoulder and said, "You seem like yourself again." I looked at her and smiled. Feels like I'm finally living my life instead of funding someone else's. When we got back, I dove into work with new energy. I pitched a partnership to a local interior designer who specialized in luxury homes. She'd been hesitant before, worried I couldn't meet demand, but now I had the team. I had the workflow. Within a month, we had 3 jobs lined up for high-end custom furniture, and a 4th came through as a Business was good, life was good, and for the first time in my adult memory, not a single call from my parents or Madison, until the day they showed up. It was a rainy Monday afternoon. I was in the shop going over project timelines with my crew when Diana, my office manager, walked over with this weird look on her face. "Jake," she said, hesitating, "you've got visitors, your parents, and your sister." I felt my stomach twist. I hadn't seen them in nearly a year, not since I'd canceled the transfers and walked out of their house. I took a breath, told Diana to hold them in the front lobby, and stepped into my office to compose myself. I didn't feel fear, not even anger really, just a deep, annoyed curiosity. What could they possibly want now? When I entered the waiting area, I knew instantly something was wrong. Mom looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was frizzy, makeup smudged under her eyes. Dad looked older, tired, like life had finally caught up to him. And Madison. Well, Madison looked like someone who'd been forced to eat humble pie for the first time in her life. She didn't meet my eyes. That alone was a sign the world had tilted. I crossed my arms and stood by the door. "What do you want?" Mom started to cry, of course. "Jake, honey, we need to talk. It's about your sister." I didn't say anything, just stared at them, waiting. Dad cleared his throat. "Preston? He found out Madison was cheating. They're getting divorced." He cut her off completely. "No credit cards, no house, no nothing. She's moved back in with us." I tilted my head. "And that's my problem? How?" Mom wiped her eyes with a tissue. "We're falling behind on bills. The mortgage is 2 months late. Utilities are about to be shut off. With her back home, we just can't manage." I kept my face neutral. Inside, I felt a flash of dark amusement. The golden girl. The one who sneered at my blue-collar job. The one who once said my workshop was cute for a hobby. The one who called me a sawdust-covered joke at a Christmas dinner. Now back home, broke, and dragging them down with her. "You need money," I said flatly. They nodded. "And you came to me." More nodding. I let the silence hang in the air for a full 10 seconds, just long enough to make it hurt. "I'm going to enjoy this," I finally said, smiling without warmth. "So let me get this straight. The daughter you celebrated, who never worked a real day in her life, married rich and cheated on her husband, got tossed out, and now you're all in crisis mode because your little ecosystem of denial finally collapsed?" "Jake," Mom whispered, "she's your sister." I raised an eyebrow. "You're right, she is. She's also the one who told me I didn't belong on a luxury cruise because I'd embarrassed the group in my work boots, who laughed when I told her about my restoration projects, who mocked my wedding and bragged that her vacation home was bigger than my entire business." Dad tried the old guilt move. "We're family, son." "You're all we have." I laughed out loud, a real laugh. "No. I'm not all you have. You had Madison, you had Preston, you had choices. You just never chose me. So now that your fantasies imploded, you're here with your hands out. That's not family. That's desperation." Madison finally spoke, her voice bitter. "I didn't ask to come here. They brought me." I turned to her, letting every ounce of disdain show on my face. "Good, because if you had, I'd have called security." Dad looked shocked. "What happened to you?" "I got tired of being used," I said simply. "I started valuing myself. You should try it sometime." They stood there, shifting uncomfortably. Mom tried one more time. "Please, Jake. Just until we get back on our feet." I leaned against the doorway. "What did you do with all the money I gave you? $48,000. What did that buy? Cruises? Clothes? Vacations? It sure as hell didn't buy respect, and it's not buying anything else from me." "Jake," Madison said, her voice shaking a little. "I messed up. But I'm your sister." "You're nothing to me," I replied quietly, "and you made sure of that a long time ago." I turned and walked away without another word, left them standing in the lobby. Diana was waiting at the front desk. I nodded once. She understood. "Escort them out." That night Emily and I went out for dinner, sat on the patio of our favorite little restaurant, just the two of us. I told her everything. She smiled and raised her glass. "To never looking back. To never being used again," I added, and I meant every word. After that day, I fully expected another wave of manipulative calls, maybe even a few dramatic letters or desperate voicemails from extended family. But nothing came. Just silence. I think they finally understood I meant it when I said I was done, not just with the money, but with the entire charade. And to be honest, the quiet was glorious. My life had room to breathe for the first time in years. Over the next several months, the shop kept growing. We landed 2 contracts with historic districts around Ohio for furniture restoration. I was now one of only a handful of certified craftsmen in the state allowed to work on historic preservation projects. Clients started flying in from as far as Chicago and Charleston just to consult with me. And I didn't advertise. Word of mouth had become my best marketing tool. Emily would laugh and say, "You're the most successful sawdust-covered nobody I've ever met." We made the decision to finally start trying for a baby, something we'd been quietly putting off for years because there was always some financial emergency, just never ours. Now we were in control. No more unexpected drains, no more emotional blackmail disguised as parental need, just two people finally living on their own terms. And when Emily got pregnant 3 months later, I cried. Not because I was scared, but because I finally felt ready. I wasn't carrying the burden of an ungrateful family anymore. I had space in my heart, in my wallet, and in my home for the future. We named our son Caleb, after my grandfather, the only person in my family who ever truly saw me and believed in my work. Caleb was born in early spring, just as the trees were starting to bud. He came into the world loud and full of life, tiny fists flailing, dark eyes scanning the hospital room like he was already making plans. Holding him in my arms, I made a promise. I would never make him feel like he was less than. I'd never compare him to anyone else. He'd grow up knowing that love doesn't have to be earned with awards or titles. It's given unconditionally. Emily cut back her nursing hours to spend more time with Caleb. We could afford it now. We had a beautiful 4-bedroom house with a big backyard and a sunlit nursery. We had savings, a college fund already started. Everything Madison used to flaunt, I now had, but built with my own hands and on my own terms. 2 years after cutting ties, I'd barely thought about my parents anymore. They were just part of a story I used to tell myself, that if I worked hard enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, maybe I'd finally be enough. But I'd stopped chasing that. The only approval I needed now was from the family I'd created, my wife, my son, and the team I showed up for every day at the shop. But of course, the past has a funny way of knocking on your door just when you least expect it. One Friday afternoon, while I was in the middle of fitting a curved drawer face for a restored French writing desk, Diana buzzed me from the front. "Jake, it's your mom. She's here. Alone." I stopped mid-sand, stared at the grain pattern for a few seconds, and exhaled. "Tell her I'm busy." There was a pause. "She says it's important. She won't leave." I finished smoothing the edge before replying. "Tell her she's got 5 minutes, then I want her gone." When I walked into the office, she looked even older than I remembered. Her hair had gone fully gray, her posture slumped. She held her purse tightly in her lap like she was afraid I might take it from her. When she saw me, she smiled faintly, but I didn't return it. "You look good, Jake," she said quietly. "I don't have time for small talk. What do you want?" Tears welled in her eyes, and for once I didn't feel moved by them. She'd spent years using tears as tools, lubricants to slide past accountability, but not today. "It's Madison," she began. "She moved out last month, tried living with a friend in Denver. It didn't work out." I raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. She burned that bridge too." Mom nodded, ashamed. She's in a bad place, Jake. No job, no savings. She even tried selling some of her things online, but—" I cut her off. "Why are you telling me this? You think this is going to trigger something in me? That I'm going to feel guilty and come running to fix it?" She flinched. "No, I just thought you should know." I folded my arms. "And," she hesitated, "we're selling the house. We can't keep up with the payments. We're moving into a small apartment near Akron." I nodded slowly. "That's probably wise." "I was hoping," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "that maybe you'd consider talking to your sister. Just one conversation." I laughed, not loudly, not mockingly, just sad and tired. "You still don't get it. You think this is about one conversation? This was decades in the making. A whole childhood of being invisible, a whole adulthood of being treated like a bank with a toolbox, and you want to fix that with coffee and a guilt trip?" She opened her mouth, but I stopped her. "You know what the difference is between you and me? I changed. I grew. I took a hard look at myself, saw what wasn't working, and I fixed it. Madison never did. And you two never made her. You coddled her, protected her from consequences, and now you're shocked she can't handle life." "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I really am. I believe you're sorry, I said, but I don't think you're sorry for the right reasons. You're sorry because life got hard, not because of how you treated me. She nodded again, slowly, then stood up. Goodbye, Jake. I didn't respond, just turned and walked back to my workshop, hands already itching to get back to the project in front of me, a desk that had seen centuries of wear but still stood tall. A survivor, just like me. That night, Emily and I sat on the porch with Caleb napping in her arms. I told her about the visit. She didn't say much, just listened, just like always. Then she reached over and took my hand. You made the right call, she said. And I knew I had. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fix a broken system. I was building something better, something real, something mine. A few weeks after my mom's unannounced visit, we got a handwritten letter in the mail. It had no return address, just my name written carefully across the envelope. Emily handed it to me without a word. I opened it slowly, expecting another round of guilt. But it wasn't that. It was from my dad. 4 pages long, the handwriting was a little shaky but unmistakably his. He started by saying he never knew how to talk to me, that every time he tried it came out wrong, that he grew up with a father who saw emotions as weakness, and he thought the best way to love me was by pushing me harder, into something more respectable, more impressive, more like Madison. He said he admired my work, always had, but didn't know how to express it because it didn't look like the kind of success he'd been taught to value. He admitted he was wrong. About the cruise, about the years of minimizing my wins, about the silence after my trade school graduation, about laughing at my business, and about using me like a credit card on demand. He said that when I walked out that day, it broke something in him. But maybe it needed to be broken. He said that when Preston left Madison, it was like watching a sandcastle get hit by a wave. Everything they'd built up around her crumbled instantly. All the privileges, all the bragging rights, gone in an instant. He said that's when he finally understood what I'd been saying all those years, that love without respect is just noise. He ended the letter by saying he didn't expect forgiveness. He just wanted me to know he finally saw me not as the disappointment, but as the only one in the family who stood on his own. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it into a drawer. I didn't call him. I didn't write back. I didn't even tell Emily exactly what it said, because while I appreciated the words, I'd learned that change isn't about what you say when you've hit bottom. It's about what you do when you're on solid ground and still choose to do right by people. And I wasn't going to let a few paragraphs undo years of being second best. One evening, as the workshop was closing, I noticed Caleb toddling around the front desk with a little wooden mallet I'd carved for him. He was smacking it gently against a scrap piece of pine, pretending to fix it just like I did. Emily stood nearby, watching him with a soft smile. That moment hit me harder than anything else in the past year. I had the chance to build something different for my son. A world where he never had to question if he was enough, and I was damn sure not going to waste it. I built him a tiny workbench beside mine. Every Saturday we'd spend an hour there. Sometimes he'd just bang around and make a mess, but sometimes he'd watch me carefully, mimicking my movements. I didn't care if he ever followed in my footsteps. That wasn't the point. The point was that he knew, no matter what path he chose, his father would be in his corner. Years passed. Miller Woodworks became one of the most sought-after shops in the tri-state area. I expanded again, took on apprentices, donated custom furniture to schools and hospitals, sponsored a scholarship at the local trade school. Not because I needed the recognition, but because I wanted kids like I was. Quiet, overlooked, underestimated. To know they mattered. And every month I'd still put $600, 0 cents, into that savings account. Not because I had to, but because it reminded me where I'd been. That account eventually became Caleb's college fund. It grew steadily, almost poetically, with the same rhythm that used to drain me. Madison never reached out, not once. She eventually moved to Portland, from what I heard through the grapevine, tried freelancing as a branding consultant. Mom and Dad sold the house and moved into a small retirement condo. I didn't visit. I didn't call. The grief of what never was between us faded into a quiet indifference. Sometimes indifference is the most powerful closure of all. One day, Diana forwarded me an email from a local high school asking if I'd speak at their career day. The principal said one of the students had brought in a photo of a desk I'd made and asked, "How do you get to do something like that?" I agreed without hesitation. Standing in that gym, talking to a bunch of wide-eyed teenagers about chisels, business licenses, and why failure isn't the enemy, I realized something important. My story, every rejection, every insult, every invisible victory, wasn't just mine. It belonged to every kid who felt like they weren't enough in their own family. Every person told they'd never make it because they chose a different path. At the end of my talk, one kid came up to me and said, "I don't think my dad would be proud of me if I became a carpenter, but I want to anyway." I looked him straight in the eye and told him the truth. You don't live your life to fill someone else's idea of success. You build it, piece by piece, until it's yours. So here I am, years later, with stained hands, a thriving business, a happy marriage, and a son who thinks I'm a superhero because I can make a table out of a pile of wood. And you know what? That's more than enough. To anyone watching this who's stuck in a family that only shows up when they need something, or who constantly tells you that what you're doing isn't good enough, I want you to hear this. You are enough. What you build matters. Who you become matters. And walking away from people who don't see your value isn't cruel. It's necessary. I've built a life I'm proud of, not in spite of where I came from, but because I finally stopped letting it define me. And now, every time I tuck Caleb into bed, I think to myself, he'll never have to wonder if he was the favorite. He'll just know he was loved. And that, more than anything, is my legacy. If this story hit home for you, drop a comment below. Let me know how you broke free, or how you're planning to, and if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it to them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because real stories like this, they deserve to be heard.